Good evening. This is Violette Haldane, and today is October 5th, Monday, and this is another one of our Community Coalition's discussions. Today's topic is Immigration Forum 2020, and thank you everyone for being here. And I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Debbie Hutchinson, who will be our facilitator this afternoon. And Deb, I am going to turn it over to you, and maybe you can give a little bit about your background, and then we can start. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Haldane. My name is Debbie Hutchinson. I am a Vice Consul for the Government of Jamaica. I have been in the United States for the last 17 years. I'm the longest serving female liaison officer appointed by the Government of Jamaica, with special responsibilities for migrant workers in the United States. I am responsible for 8 states, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and 4 states in the Northeast, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. I manage a population anywhere from 1,600 to 2,000, and these are Jamaican nationals who come in to work on seasonal visas. So as you can imagine, immigration is important to me. This has been a very traumatic year for many migrant workers from Jamaica because of the ban on the H-2B visa. And it has also been a very topsy-turvy year for Jamaicans in the agricultural sector who are about to return home at the end of the agricultural season. So without further ado, I'm happy to have been asked to facilitate this discussion. It's my first discussion on immigration, and I'm happy to be a part of the Immigration Forum 2020. I want to acknowledge our City Council representatives who are here. I see we have Councilman Michton, and we also have Councilwoman Bermudez, who is in attendance. Good evening. I also want to recognize those persons, Beverly, Red, and Shirley, and the team who are making this all possible, as well as the West Indian Foundation. They've been doing great work bringing the community together and connecting lives. With that said, our first presentation this evening comes from Laurie Houseman, who's an attorney at law. And Laurie, I'm anxious to find out about the American Place. I don't know much about it. I'm looking forward to your presentation. I understand that you've been doing amazing work for many of the Caribbean peoples. So without further ado, I turn it over to you to begin this exciting evening.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Great. And so again, I'm Laurie Houseman. I am the immigration attorney at the Hartford Public Library. We have a program providing naturalization services to the community. It didn't advance. There we go. So the naturalization services that I'm managing is part of the American Place. The American Place was founded in the year 2000 in response to the needs of the community. We're providing English learning, career pathways, GED prep and testing, English after school English, as well as next steps for beyond learning your English, crossroads to connectivity, which will actually put a laptop and a Wi-Fi hotspot into your home if you qualify. My program, the Naturalization Services, and then citizenship preparation, which is a whole series of classes to prepare you to pass your test and become a United States citizen. The Naturalization Services, we provide legal advice and representation where needed for applying to, when you apply to become a United States citizen. The legal term for that is naturalization. Also, because it supports U.S. citizenship, we are also providing green card renewal, and we can provide legal advice on that, or we can simply do data entry. We also provide services to help U.S. citizens who do not have certificates of citizenship to get their citizenship certificate. A lot of people ask me, why should I bother becoming a United States citizen? It's a lot of work. You have to take a test. There are some good reasons. Safety. Safety is huge. It's huge in 2020 if you're an immigrant. It was huge in 2019 if you're an immigrant. If you are a lawful permanent resident and you get caught in possession of over 1 ounce of marijuana, you are possibly facing a deportation. If you're a US citizen and you're caught in possession of over 1 ounce of marijuana, if it's your first time, it could be, I don't know, a couple hours in jail, a community service, not a big deal. If you violate a protective order, that means you got, your visitation day wrong, you showed up at the wrong time, wrong place. If you are a US citizen, again, you might have to go talk to the judge, you might have to do some community service. If you're a lawful permanent resident, you could be facing deportation. That's safety. Unlimited travel. If you are a US citizen, you can become an expat. You can go live in another country for as long as you want and maintain your US citizenship. If you are a lawful permanent resident, you can only be outside the United States for up to 6 months at a time without having some sort of consequences. As a US citizen, you can petition for family members. This means that you can bring mom to the United States. If you are a lawful permanent resident, you're limited only to very, very immediate family members, spouses, children. You have to be a US citizen to get your parents to come to the United States. A big one in this upcoming year, you can vote if you're a US citizen. That's one of the reasons that we're in so much trouble that we're in right now, is because people just thought it would be okay. They didn't vote. Please, you've got to become a US citizen. You've got to vote. You've got to exercise your right to vote. You're paying taxes. Why not have a say? If you're a US citizen, you can get certain government jobs and benefits that a lawful permanent resident is not eligible for. And then lastly, one of the biggest gifts that you can possibly give as a parent, if you naturalize and become a United States citizen while your child is living with you and under 18 years old, they just automatically become a United States citizen. They derive citizenship from you. Qualifications. To become a United States citizen, you need to be 18 years or older. You need to have a green card for at least 5 years, 3 years if you're married to a US citizen. You need to have continuous residency, which means that you have to have been in the United States for more than half of the time of the last 5 years. You need to have good moral character, which is a phrase which is intentionally vague. It's intentionally vague because the government is trying to catch as many problems as they can. It includes things like being up to date on your child support, having paid all your taxes, and then yes, not having committed certain crimes within the last 5 years. You have to speak English. That sounds pretty straightforward, I know, but they actually test you on 4 aspects of that. You have to speak, understand, read, and write English. It's hard. That's the most common reason that people do not become a United States citizen, is because they do not pass the English. You need to know civics, US civics and history. This means that you have to learn the 100 questions. You've all heard about it, 100 questions. Oath of allegiance. You have to take the oath of allegiance. You have to make certain promises in order to become a United States citizen. The good news is that there are exceptions. There are exceptions to these requirements. If you are 55 years old and you've had a green card for at least 15 years, then you can take, or if you're 50 years old and you've had a green card for 20 years, you can take the whole interview in your language of choice. If you are 65 years old and you've had a green card for at least 20 years, then you only need to know 20 of the civics questions. There's also a disability exception for people who are severely disabled. That will get the applicant out of both the requirement to speak English as well as the civics questions. I have to be honest, it's not easy to get. That's what I specialize in over at the library, is helping people to succeed and be granted the disability exception. But in order to attain that, we need to have a medical provider who's willing to work with us and is interested in helping their patient. And then there's also an oath exception. There are several religions that will not allow their practitioners to take an oath to something other than their God. or perhaps your religion does not allow you to carry a gun. There are ways to get around that. You may have heard in the news, you may have heard out on the street, but their fee increases are coming. Right now, the fee is $725, which is a lot of money. But as of October 2nd, yes, that was last week, it was supposed to go up to $1,170. That's a ton of money. Luckily, thank God for California, the 9th District came through and put a stay on this fee increase. The fee increase is slated to also eliminate fee waivers and to eliminate the reduced fee option. We are on borrowed time. The only thing that's stopping the fee increases coming forward is another appeal. You know how this goes. So please apply to become a citizen now. Get it while you can at this reduced rate of $725. The library is here to help. We are too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Attorney Houseman. I noticed that there was a question in the chat room. I think it's a relevant question that I don't want to delay. I want to take it right now. And it was in regards to marijuana. And I think Councilman Michton had wanted to know if the rules applied to those states where marijuana was legal. So if you could elaborate on how that works in those states.
Yeah, so immigration is a federal program. Immigration, the federal laws apply, and so they look to the federal laws in regard to the drug, in regard to possession of drugs and sales of drugs and so forth. And marijuana is still illegal under the federal laws. So if you were in possession of more than 30 grams of marijuana, then you have committed a federal crime, even if you're in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is legal. And then that's a ground for deportation according to the immigration laws.
That's interesting to know. I also wondered, the American Place, is it open now? Are you having appointments? How do people approach the American Place in light of COVID? Have there been any changes? What can you tell us?
So we've been open through the whole quarantine and through the virus. I've been working full-time continuously. However, I'm doing most of my work through Zoom. I'm doing most of my work remotely, but I actually find there are a lot of benefits to that, especially, with a lot of clients who are working. It's much easier to do a 6 o'clock appointment or a Saturday appointment when we're both Zooming. So there are definitely some upsides. There are some downsides to not being able to be in the same room, but there are some upsides. All of the other programs also are the same sort of situation. I know that my colleagues are also, they're coming up with very inventive ways and to work through Zoom and FaceTime and all the other video ways to meet with, if it's virtually, but to take care of and serve their clients.
All right, so I'm just checking to see. So at this point, I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It was quite informative. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that we have a lot more to learn. I'm going to toss things over to Violette Haldane, who's in charge of advocacy to legacy. I know you had some outstanding achievements recently, but also, Ms. Haldane, I know this is less than a month to go before elections in the United States. Take us through voter registration. I can't hear, I'm not sure. Ms. Haldane, are you on mute? I'm not hearing at all.
Oh, sorry about that. As everyone knows, I love to talk about the census, and I'm going to start there. It has been extended until October 31st. And I just included the website where you can go and complete your census, or the phone number where you can go. And I just want everyone to know that completing the census is part of our civic responsibility as immigrants. I know one of the concerns is that if you complete it, your information will be shared. By law, your information cannot be shared with anyone. And it's very important that we are counted, because the census does two main things. It provides funding to a lot of programs that we in the community use that we may not realize. I always talk about it provides funding for Section 8, WIC, Early Childhood Education, Head Start, and a lot of other programs that you would be surprised. For each person that was counted in 2010, because the census is only done every 10 years, the state of Connecticut gets $2,900 a year. So over 10 years, that's almost $30,000 the state is getting. So if our numbers are not there, we will lose a lot of funding for programs that we use. Also, it does help with redistricting. The president is determined based on electoral votes. The census determined how many electoral votes each state has. And so that's another reason for completing the census. So please, if you have not completed it, please go out and do it. And it's for everyone who is living in your house, even a baby, if they were born on April 1st. So please do that, whether they are documented or undocumented or a citizen. Every person should be counted. So the election is, I guess, 29 days away. I think I saw this morning on something. And as you know, a lot of our positions that support us in the federal government, represent us in the federal government, we will be voting on that day, in addition to some of our state positions. Registration, if you have not registered to vote, we have until October 27th. You can go online, and I do have the link in this document below. It can be postmarked, or you can go to your registrar or voter in the town that you live in. And there is election day registration, but this is not something that I think that you should hold out for. This is good if you go to register and your name is not on the list. Then I know for Hartford, on election day, if you go to a polling station and they say your name is not there, you can go to the registrar of voters. That's where it is right now, and you would be able to register if you have the proper identification and vote there. And all towns do allow this, but this is an exception. Please register in advance. And anyone who is a US citizen, age 18 or older, is a resident of the town in which he or she is getting ready to vote. And if you have been convicted of a felony, if you completed your confinement and your parole, you are eligible to vote. If you have any questions, I suggest you speak to your registrar of voters to get confirmation that you are eligible. But it's, you're a US citizen, age 18, and you live in the town, and you can provide documentation that you live in the town. Also, it's very easy to register to vote now. If you go to DMV, they have the process automated if you're renewing your driver's license. So please register in advance. There's been a lot of talk about absentee ballots, and I'm just going to touch lightly on this. You have to have requested and received it by November 2nd. You have to have returned it by November 3rd, by mail or in person by November 3rd, 8 p.m. And all voters are eligible to vote by absentee ballot due to COVID-19. So because of COVID, all voters this year are eligible to vote. It may change 4 years from now, okay? The form is Form ED3, and I have listed the portal here. You may get the form at your town clerk, or you may get it from the Secretary of State website. I just want to note that only the voter's immediate family member or caretaker may assist in the voting, in the voter completing the form. Please be, if you are not in the person's immediate family or their caretaker, please do not assist. Do not fill it out for someone, okay? And if you fill it out because of their family member or caretaker, you have to sign the form as an assister and print your name, your residence, and phone number. So remember that these are legal documents and there are consequences and they can be audited. Okay, so that's the information I'm given. I suggest if anyone has any questions, they go to their registrar or voter in the town in which they live and ask your questions there. Okay, thank you. Deb, you're on mute.
I thought I clicked it. I apologize. Thank you so much, Violette, Haldane. Thank you for a very comprehensive look at voting this year, and also the synopsis on the census. I know that at the end, there are persons who want to discuss what it looks like in terms of the number of persons who've completed the census for Hartford. Are we in trouble? Are we getting it done, essentially? So at the end of the conversation, that's something we might want to look at and get some feedback as to where we are and what we need to do.
Okay.
In terms of census and voting. At this point, I would love to invite Councilwoman Wildaliz Bermudez to take center stage and talk to us about Families Facing Deportation Fund. What is it? How did it start? Where do we go with it? How can we help?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to share with you an update on the Hartford Families Facing Deportation Fund. I'm also joined by Councilman Joshua Michton, who will be presenting with me tonight. And we did see Councilwoman Shirley Surgeon as well as part of the meeting. But we did want to give you an update on both the history of the Families Facing Deportation Fund, also known as FFDF. How did we even come to having a Families Facing Deportation Fund in the city of Hartford? How did we get here? And how is the fund used? How was it used last year? And how is it used now? And so right in the beginning of the screen, you can see photos of ourselves. I am with my, at this point, she was a little baby. I'm with my little baby, and I am joined on my left-hand side with different representatives, elected officials. We have State Representative Robin Porter. There's also State Senator Gary Winfield, and then we're also joined in that photo by Rose Lopez, who's a city councilor in the town of Wyndham, Willimantic, and then the last person, the tallest person on that photo was running for governor in Rhode Island. And if you see the WF, it means that we have either been endorsed by the Working Families Party. So some of the folks that you see in that photo are both Democrats and have received the endorsement of Working Families Party. In our case, Councilman Josh Michton and I, we are Working Family Party city council members. And then on the photo on the right, Councilman Michton, did you want to just add a little bit of that photo? Let us know what it's about.
Sure. So that was taken when a number of activists, including at times me and you can see I'm down in the corner because I'm holding the camera, and my wife is the one right, with the pink jacket and the baby. That baby is also less small now. We were occupying the ICE building downtown at 450 Main Street, hoping to put pressure broadly for changes for a number of folks, but especially for Taz Walton, who's a North End resident. I guess technically originally from England. Her folks are from Jamaica, but she came here when she was a little kid. And she had, when she was a teenager, she had some criminal involvement, but then she pretty much was straightened out, raising her daughter, working, and ICE swept in and had her in detention for a really long time trying to deport her. So that was part of the ultimately successful campaign to get her free and back to her family. And she's back in Hartford now and working and straightened out.
Excellent. It's always good to hear positive stories. And the photo there, we are in San Francisco at a very big demonstration on abolishing ICE. Can we see the next slide? And I want to thank Renato, who's doing the slides for us and put together the presentation that you're seeing tonight. So the question, right, is why is sanctuary city not enough? We recognize that the city of Hartford has been a sanctuary city for some time. It was actually over 8 years ago that the Hartford City Council, under then Mayor Pedro Segarra, that city council put forth an ordinance. And in the ordinance, they said, you know, we want to make sure that Hartford becomes a sanctuary city. Hartford is not the only city in Connecticut that's a sanctuary city. As many of you are familiar with, there are a couple of other cities, a total of around 12 to 15, that consider themselves sanctuary cities. And in short, what that means is that our city agencies, so that's every single department for the city of Hartford, that's including our public school systems, that's including, of course, the police department, the health department, every single department will not work to actively deport folks who are residents in our city. Basically, the stance is, if ICE exists, then ICE is doing ICE. We're not going to occupy ourselves with specifically targeting people who are Hartford residents in our community, who perhaps have extended their stay and now find themselves in this weird limbo of potentially being deported. We have actively taken a stance where we're saying, as a city, we will not do that. As a city, we will not put our resources towards that energy. And so, but we recognize, of course, that even though we are a sanctuary city and have been for some time, it's not enough. ICE still deports residents that live in Hartford, and some of them have lived here for a very long time. So there's still this fear of deportation. And, you know, some folks said, well, it's a pandemic, you know, people are staying at home, things are chill. Well, there's still deportations that are happening. There are still deportations during this pandemic that are happening. And so we know that also in the past, there's been oftentimes minimal assistance and in some cases no assistance whatsoever for families. And when we say assistance, that's the bigger word of assistance in terms of, will the federal government assist families? No, they're not doing that because they're the ones that are deporting. What will the state do to assist families that are facing deportation? And so it's really what we've seen is that it's been up to a lot of the local activists and at the grassroots level and through the kindness of groups and individuals who've taken it upon themselves to form some type of assistance. And so we know that for individuals, residents who've been living here for a very long time, and the attorney touched upon this when she gave her presentation, you could be living here for 20 years. And if you haven't applied to become a citizen, and if you haven't gone through that process, and if you haven't actually then become a citizen, it doesn't matter how long you've been here because you're still at risk of being deported, and you're still at risk of being arrested by ICE. And so basically anything can trigger an arrest if you've extended your stay. And the most minimal thing, and then the example that Josh was mentioning earlier with Wazzaro, Taz Wazzaro, also known as Wazzaro, Taz, also known as Taz Walton, that's the case. That's what we saw play out. And so can we go to the next slide, please?
You know, can I jump in real quick, Wildaliz,
Yes.
just to sort of give some contour to that? When we talk about what, you know, and I think a lot of the folk here know this because they probably know someone who's experienced it. You know, when someone gets picked up, even before they're deported, if they're in detention, you know, that's a family that's lost a breadwinner or a childcare provider. You know, I don't want to say it's like a death in the family, but it's like suddenly somebody's gone. And so everything shifts. And so a lot of the work that those community organizations that Wildaliz is talking about, that I'm also involved in, is just, you know, helping people make rent, helping them get groceries, helping them figure out how they're going to work and have childcare. You know, it's not as simple as just the legal assistance or just posting bond. It's a whole constellation of problems that arise when you suddenly take one adult out of the family.
That's right. And it's only exacerbated. Taz's case is a very particular case. And the reason why we want to highlight this, not just because we're talking about a Hartford resident, but the case became a national case. And the context behind it also was, you know, our Attorney General, William Tong, was very vocal and had many interviews about this case and saying how dare you, ICE, deport someone who has already received a pardon, a Connecticut pardon. Governor Lamont was also very vocal. So there was this collective effort, not just at the grassroots level, which is so important, but thanks to the grassroots and the activists on the ground who for days and weeks and months stood out in front of the federal courthouse, held demonstrations, held different rallies, organized press conferences, and so on and so forth, calling attention to this, that really highlighted this case at the national level. That's why we're mentioning it here in this presentation. And we recognize that for every Taz that exists, there are hundreds of other Hartford residents that are going through the same exact thing. And we recognize that it wasn't enough at our local level to say, oh, we're a sanctuary city, we're all set, we're good, we're straight. No, actually that's not enough, because as folks who represent the community and as people who are constantly in contact with and people calling us and emailing us and saying, hey, there's this other case, there's this other family member, there's this loved one that I have that is going through the deportation. And we're sitting here, we're racking our heads and we're like, what are we gonna do? Because if what we have is an ordinance, which is a city law and it's on paper, but we don't have anything else to back it up, we need more. We recognize that our community deserves and demands more. And that's how Families Facing Deportation was born, out of that necessity. So next slide, please. So what is Families Facing Deportation Fund, also known as FFDF? So there were funds that were set aside from the city of Hartford, and we started off with $30,000. The funds were set aside during fiscal year 2019, and by January of 2020, we were able to have a soft rollout of the Families Facing Deportation Fund, and it was actually held at the Hartford Public Library. Thank you, Hartford Public Library, for being an awesome collaborator. And the funds exist, and by the way, that this is the first time in Connecticut that a municipality has utilized city funds to assist residents who are facing deportation and to help them with resources. But it is not the first time that this is being done, because we see many of these types of efforts already happening in places like New York and California, and the list goes on. And so we were using that model to implement it here in Hartford, with the hopes that it could also be replicated in other cities where we have a big immigrant constituency. So $30,000 were set aside initially. The rollout occurred in January of this year of 2020, and the funds were available for rent, groceries, healthcare bills, any legal costs and fees, and it was basically completely confidential. There's confidentiality that we recognized that had to be part of the FFDF process. There were multiple collaboration efforts with different partners between the Hartford Public Library, Hartford Legal Aid. Thank you so much to the West Indian Social Club of Hartford for also being part of the partner group, the Hispanic Health Council, and the list goes on, CRT, and it was a soft rollout that we began, and many families were able to get some kind of basic assistance. Now moving on to 2021. So as you all know, our new fiscal year budget was approved by City Council, and with that, it meant that we had a new opportunity in front of us. And if Councilman Michton, if you want to give the update of what that looks like, of what we voted on.
Well, so this was, we had this opportunity to where if we could appropriate, the city, I should say, could appropriate $100,000, the Vera Fund for Justice, which is a national nonprofit that does actually all kinds of stuff, basically had told us that they would match that. And so we would sort of double our money, and it was to focus this time, as you can see from the slide, on legal assistance, which obviously I can't say with certainty that it's the single biggest cost of people facing deportation, but it is a big cost. The cost associated with hiring a lawyer, and for the lawyers, I'm a lawyer, not an immigration lawyer, but a lawyer. I mean, they have to, a lot of these cases aren't, even though the person was in Hartford, their case might be up to Boston. There are cases that are in Texas. So the costs around these cases are really quite high. And so what the City Council was able to do was, in essence, give this larger pool of funds to help with representation. It's worth noting, and I say this, I'm a public defender, people in immigration court don't get a lawyer automatically. In New York City they do, I think, but not everywhere, and certainly not here. So this is really important to have these funds for that.
That's right. And so we know that the need exists even amidst a pandemic. We recognize that we wanted to do more as a city. And so $30,000, we saw it as a great starting point as a pilot program. And where things are at right now is making sure that the city of Hartford is able to obtain that matching grant from the Vera Fund Institute, which would then bump us up to $200,000. So in the previous year, the $30,000 provided services for up to 21 individuals that are Hartford residents that are facing deportations, and or maybe their family members were facing deportation. And so certainly this is a very strong and important statement that we're making at the city level, because of the fact that even though there were different stimulus packages that were approved at the federal level, we know that there weren't that many types of resources for individuals facing deportation in our cities, and certainly no kind of very minimal types of assistance for immigrants who are undocumented. So all in all, we felt that it was the least that we can do to really make sure that our residents who are immigrants are also taken care of. They bring forth so much to our everyday life and our community, and also pay taxes and there's so many ands with that. And so it's the least that we can do. So we have the last slide, I believe. This is information that we've posted on our website. Our website is www.wizandjosh.org. You can also follow us on social media platforms. We're on Facebook. We're also on Twitter and Instagram. But the best way to connect with us is really through email. And those are our emails right there. It's just our first and last name, Wildaliz.Bermudez and Joshua.Michton@hartford.gov. Josh, did you also want to add something before we sign off?
You know, just this, because the population of immigrants in Hartford is there's such a big chunk of it that's West Indians. I think a lot of times in the national discourse about immigration, for Spanish-speaking immigrants, who obviously also there's a lot of in Hartford, including my wife, and who matter a lot. But I think we forget, and I think people don't realize that the immigration system is super duper racist against people from the African diaspora. Like, Black immigrants are more likely to be detained. They're more likely to be deported. They're more likely to be deported more quickly. And maybe that's not news to, I think, a lot of the folks in this virtual room, but I always try to bring it up because I think it doesn't get said enough in the national discourse, and it's especially important for Hartford.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Bermudez and Councilman Josh Michton. I also want to acknowledge Councilwoman Surgeon, who has given so many years, more than 3 decades of service to public life, and all the work that you've been doing. I really think that you've been a stalwart too. And even though you're not on tonight's presentation, I think it's prudent that we acknowledge also your efforts in this process. So thank you, gentlemen and ladies. And now we go over to look at the adjustment of immigrant status with noted attorney Tanya Dorman. Ms. Dorman, the floor is yours. The mic is yours, I should say.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for having me. I am here trying to share my screen. Everyone able to see my screen? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, we can
Very
see.
good. All right. So thanks for having me. I like to talk about immigration because it's that one area of law that just seems to be popular, but at the same time, it's so involved that, you know, if you're not careful, everyone could easily be confused about what's going on. So everyone who's not a citizen is subject to removal from the United States. Before 1997, the process of removing non-citizens from the United States was called deportation proceedings. We still use the term deportation proceedings now, but it's actually removal proceedings. And the reason they changed the law in 1997, between 1996 and 1997, to implement the new removal proceedings and to sort of do away with the deportation proceedings, was for the mere fact that the deportation laws, they were a little bit more favorable to non-citizens. They were a little bit more favorable because it would allow judges more discretion to give relief from removal, you know, and so even people with criminal records and criminal convictions, they were able to get benefits like suspension of deportation, 212C waivers, and things like that back in the day. Now that we've changed everything over to removal proceedings, then everyone is wide open to be deported if you're a non-citizen. So that is, it includes the lawful permanent residents, which they are green card holders, non-immigrant visa holders, so that would be the tourists, the students, the people who come in on temporary studies like M visa holders, J visa holders, L visas who are transferred workers from foreign countries, and performers. Those are the non-immigrant types of non-citizens that would be subject to removal as well. You also have people who were lawfully admitted to the United States as visa waiver, under the visa waiver program. So there are people from like Italy and France, they get to come in without a visa, but they're only limited to 90 days. They're also subject to removal from the United States. And of course you have parolees, refugees, asylees, who they still try to deport even though they're here on refugee status or asylee status. And then we have people.
Tanya, if you could
Yes?
put into presentation mode. I think we're only seeing slide 4 right now.
All right, I'm still on slide 4.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So the last section of slide 4, I told you that immigration was involved. This could take all day. So the last category of non-citizens on slide 4 would be the folks we're familiar with. They would be people like the border crossers. So we hear a lot about the Mexicans on the southern borders. Those are the individuals who would enter the United States undetected. We normally refer to that as EWI, which is called entering without inspection, and pretty much, you know, the people that sneak in. Those guys are subject to removal. The removal process it always starts with initiation of removal from the United States by ICE. And Councilman Bermudez mentioned ICE and the push to abolish ICE. ICE normally starts removal proceedings by either detaining a person, sending out notices of notice to appear for removal hearing, or they give people interviews to come in to be interviewed, and then they get processed for removal proceedings. When you have a removal proceeding and they give you the court document, which is called the notice to appear, they give you a schedule to go in front of an immigration judge. Then you get in front of the immigration judge where the individual may be represented by counsel, or in most cases they're not, because an attorney is not appointed to represent them. They have to retain their own counsel. Ever so often, they may give you a list of free or reduced fees, sort of like the Catholic Charities or some other nonprofit organization that may represent people in removal proceeding. But in general, most people have to get their own attorney. The immigration hearing process is lengthy. It could take years sometimes, depending on the litigation. It could take even 10 years. Eventually, though, an individual will get to be at a hearing that's called a merits hearing, and that is your final hearing before the immigration judge, where a decision is made as to whether you go or whether you stay. In between, a non-citizen may have an opportunity to apply for relief from removal, whether it's adjustment of status, asylum, withholding of removal, or any other humanitarian benefit that may be available to them in immigration court. At some point, a judge will make a decision that says, yes, you get to stay here, or no, you may leave. If the decision is no, you may leave, the individual may have an opportunity to go before the Board of Immigration Appeals, which is another administrative agency with the Department of Homeland Security, to appeal the judge's order. Sometimes the judge will say, yes, you may stay, and the government is upset, and they go and they file an appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals. They all share the same bosses. Sometimes it's almost a rubber stamping of the judge's decision, you know, to deport somebody. And then if folks don't have money to go to a Second Circuit Court to appeal the board's decision, then they'll eventually get removed without fair justice in their removal proceedings. The Department of Homeland Security, which is also part of the Department of Justice, which is the boss of the district court, immigration court, federal courts, they're all the same boss. And in 1997, again, they successfully rid the US District Court of jurisdiction on a lot of immigration matters. So back in the day, folks used to be able to go to the district court, appeal an immigration judge's decision, file a habeas, look for judicial review. They have watered down that so much where you don't have direct review of any immigration proceeding before the district court. And even if you appeal before the federal court, the appellate court, a Second Circuit Court of Appeals in the jurisdiction where the non-citizen lives, that appellate court, Second Circuit Court, or circuit court in any state, they don't hear direct review of facts. It's only legal arguments that they will hear. So they will never revisit the fact, they will never look at discretion. And as a matter of fact, the law specifically says that the circuit courts have no discretion, has no jurisdiction, to review discretionary decisions by immigration judges, which puts non-citizens in a bind because most immigration judges' decisions are based on discretion. So if you're applying for a green card in front of the immigration judge, applications for adjustment of status are given as a matter of discretion. Cancellation, discretion, everything pretty much that you could get from an immigration judge, they are granted as a matter of discretion, okay? So going to the next slide. Now we talk about people being subject to removal for crimes. The most global category of criminal convictions or crimes would be those classified as aggravated felony convictions. 9 times out of 10, just about everything a person could be convicted of will be classified as an aggravated felony conviction. This means whenever you get convicted for drugs where the sentence is 1 year or more, not only is it an aggravated, well, let me change that. Drug sale, drug trafficking, where your sentence is 1 year or more, that could be an aggravated felony conviction. Crimes against persons, assaults, rapes, murder, those types of things, aggravated felony convictions. Drug convictions, controlled substance violations, those are automatic deportable offenses. Marijuana possession, like the attorney said before, yes, possession of marijuana is a federal offense in immigration context. Even if it's legal in any state, it's still a crime for immigration purposes, except they will give you a waiver or basically choose not to put you in removal proceedings if you have 1 single criminal conviction for less than 30 grams of marijuana. That's it. If you have 2 convictions for 2 joints, you are likely to be deported for violating the Federal Controlled Substances Act, and you'll be put in proceedings. They have crimes involving moral turpitude, vague crimes, but these crimes generally involve deceit. So any type of shoplifting, stealing, fraud, identity theft, things along those lines, those could get you deported as an aggravated felon and also as a person convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude. Domestic violence convictions by themselves are deportable offenses. So, sometimes people will have, domestic violence, assault, and it's an assault third, violation of a protective order. Yes, those types of convictions could get you deported from the United States. Firearms convictions, risk of injury convictions to children, abuse of the elderly, some traffic offenses, driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, if it's a felony DUI or OUI, those types of crimes will get you put in removal proceedings. Aggravated felony offenses, it's very complicated, the definition, but it's governed by federal law. They talk about the use of force, even if you didn't hurt somebody, but you kind of rough them up and fight them a little bit. The courts normally find that that type of behavior include elements of attempted use or threatened use of violent physical force against another person. So that is why even some assaults will get people deported as an aggravated felon. The domestic violence crimes are really, really difficult because sometimes culturally people are not aware that some of the things they may do culturally, can get them deported. This may include some physical abuse, sexual and psychological abuse, even against current or former spouse, children, live-in domestic partners, any type of domestic violence charge. Those will get you put in proceedings as a separate type of category other than aggravated felony offenses and crimes involving moral turpitude. Stalking, child abuse, neglect, and abandonment of children could get you put in proceedings as well. Risk of injury, even if the child is not hurt and you put your child in the back of your car without the car seat and something happens to that child, it could probably get you in deportation proceedings for violating the statute as it pertains to the welfare and well-being of children. A lot of times when people are in criminal court, a lot of the criminal attorneys, they don't really understand that there are consequences to these criminal convictions. So I would recommend anybody who's facing criminal charges and you're not a citizen, that you really try to consult with an immigration professional to make sure that you don't suffer collateral consequences of your plea. I also would want to stress that even though drugs are considered, drug convictions are considered deportable offenses, even synthetic drugs. So I had one client who ended up being convicted because he tried to sell baking powder, baking soda, and he ended up with a conviction that was a drug trafficking crime and was deported as an aggravated felon. The process of adjusting status in the United States, it's very, it should be a simple one, but it's not. And lately it's even more difficult. Normally you can adjust status if you are doing it based on a family petition, or if you're doing it through employment-based. So that means employers are able to sponsor immigrants, bring them here. In the past, they were able to adjust status if they're here in the United States. But since April 30th, 2001, they changed immigration laws. So nobody other than immediate relatives of US citizens can really file for adjustment of status. So for example, unless you're the spouse or child of a US citizen under 21, or the parent of a US citizen over 21, you're ineligible to adjust status, which means everyone else must obtain their immigrant visas from a US embassy in whatever country you live in, or whatever country is able to process that immigrant visa. The process of applying for adjustment of status comes with the petition for the immigrant to be eligible to adjust status, but then the application for adjustment of status itself requires evidence of admissibility. These are things such as not having communicable diseases, not being financially dependent on the government of the United States, not having criminal records, not having a criminal conviction of any type, anything at all that would make an immigration officer look at you as an undesirable person to live in the United States. Those are grounds of inadmissibility. Once you file for your application for adjustment of status and you're eligible to adjust status, and you fill out all the forms, you pay the exorbitant fees that are associated with those applications these days, you do your medical, so they know that you don't have any communicable diseases, you're then scheduled to go in for an immigrant interview at whichever immigration location. Right here in Hartford, they normally do it at 450 Main Street. If you're married, it's done as a Stokes interview, where they try to establish whether or not your marriage is fraudulent or you're engaged in immigration fraud, based on your relationship. If it's a family-based, they go in, they make sure they verify your information and make sure that there is no fraud or misrepresentation, because if there's fraud or misrepresentation, that immigrant will be inadmissible and subject to removal from the United States. However, once you go through the interview process and everything checks out and all is well, you're able to get your green card approved, and eventually they'll mail you the green card at some point. However long they may take, nobody knows, because everything is done on their schedule and it's done as a matter of discretion. If you get denied, you will get a lot of paperwork from immigration telling you why you're denied, and you have 30 days to file an appeal, and then they still deny you after you file the appeal, and eventually you'll get put in proceeding again and start all over, which makes immigration, or the practice of immigration law, almost like riding one of those ellipticals. You're just swinging, going back and forth till eventually, there's a resolution, in either good or bad, but eventually all good things or bad will come to an end. That's the context of my presentation tonight. I hope it was informative. It's kind of hard to put so much information into one quick thing, but I hope it was helpful to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, Dorman. I want to thank the Dorman Law Firm for, volunteering the time and giving us really, really useful information. And it was quite informative and quite comprehensive. And I'm sure that everybody learned something tonight. We are over the 9 o'clock hour, but we still have to look at foreign passports. And I think Lisa Bennett is with us.
I am.
Hi,
Hi.
Lisa.
Hi,
Nice
how
to-
are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm anxious to hear what you can tell us about the foreign passport.
Okay, good evening. My name is Lisa Bennett, and I was born in Hartford, and I've been helping Jamaicans obtain their passports for many years. And what I do is I focus really on helping them understand how important it is to have a passport in the United States and to be able to travel back and forth to their country. And I help them fill out the form, notarize it, tell them where they need to go and take their passport pictures, and how much the fee is and how long the process will take. I usually do a lot of Jamaican passports, but I'm able to do other people's passports from different West Indian countries too.
Awesome. I just wanted to add that for the Jamaicans who might be on this Zoom conference, currently, if you're even a tourist going back to Jamaica, there is not just a passport that you will need at this time. You have to do the COVID applications, and you would have to go to jamcovid19.Ministry of Health to fill out permission to land. So in lieu of COVID, I think it's also prudent to find out what are the requirements to enter other countries at
Yes.
this time. For Jamaica, if you do not have that barcode, you simply won't be able to board the flight.
Yes.
So I know that American Airlines is now looking at introducing in Miami, where they'll have everybody tested, and then you won't need that document. But as it stands, that is still in the processing stage. At this moment, if you were to travel back, you would need approval for landing. So that's something to pay attention to. And I'm going to try to add the information in the chat room so you know where to go if you need to apply for landing authorization to go to Jamaica.
Okay.
And I think that brings us to the end of a wonderful discussion, but we have some questions. There were some questions that I noted in the chat room that I think we can probably touch on. The first one that we left was, where are we with the census in Hartford County? Do you have any information as to where we are, where we need to be, what's at stake?
Okay, if Shirley Surgeon is on the call, she might have the most updated numbers, but the last time I checked, we were under 50% and we were at the lowest percentage in the state. And
Right.
so I don't know if the numbers have gone higher than that, but
We're at 44%.
we're at what now?
44%.
44? Okay, they're still in the 40s. I was kind of hoping, because I saw you out there pounding the pavement 2 weeks ago doing a census rally. So I
Yeah.
was hoping that the numbers had gone up. But
One more month to go, so which is a good thing. So we still have to be out there and we still have to pound the pavement for the next couple of weeks. If we
Yeah.
can get up to 60%, I would be really, really be happy.
yeah.
So I have a quick question for you. I live in a community with a lot of migrants, people who are here on the H-1B visa, who work for a lot of the big companies like Voya and the insurance companies. Are they required to fill out the census information? There are a lot of people who are not sure, even though I'm here for 3 years, I'm here for 4 years. Am I eligible to fill out the census information? My children attend school in the town of Windsor.
They are
I drive on the
required.
roads. Are they required?
It is required that
Any-
every person in the country complete a census. Now, there are some nuances, and I'm not sure how the migrant workers, if they live in like a dorm on the farm, or what the situation is, because there are some nuances to the completion. If they're living in an apartment, they should be filling it out. If they're living in a dorm-like setting on a farm and the employer is responsible, they might be filling it out for everyone that's there. So I don't know all the nuances of the population, but every person that's in the country should be counted.
All right, so I am glad to hear that. I noted there was another question too, as we try to encourage others to fill out the census. There was an interesting question about what do we think about the safety of the votes being counted when voting in person versus absentee ballot. Since you did the presentation on voting, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Violette.
Well, I'm an optimist and I believe in democracy. And so I think they will be counted. But I would recommend people go in person if they can. And if they cannot, I would prefer that they drop the ballot off in the boxes in front of, like in Hartford Town Hall. There are ballot boxes in each town versus putting it in the mail. And the only reason I say that is our mail it will get there, but we don't know when. And it's not as consistent as it used to be. So I think it would get counted, but the preference is to go in person, or if you cannot, to drop it in those ballot boxes, have someone drop it in those ballot boxes for you.
Can I add something to that, Violet?
Sure.
Sure. In the city of Hartford, there's 4 places you can, there are ballot boxes in the community. There's one at the corner of Albany Avenue and Blue Hills at the library. There is one at the Senior Center at Maple Avenue. And there's another ballot box that's at the corner of Park Street and New Park Avenue. And of course, there's also the ballot boxes in front of City Hall. Both your application and your ballots can be dropped in those boxes. I do agree regarding the post office services being a little bit slow right now, but I would say working for the Secretary of State's office and as a past registrar, I would definitely say the ballots and anyone who vote will be counted. They have hired so many people to make the process go as smoothly as possible. So yes, so the concern regarding the votes being counted, I would say once you've gotten your ballot to City Hall, it will be counted.
Interesting information. I've been paying attention to all that's happening in the various states across the United States, and I'm looking at what will be one of the most dramatic election moments in history for this country. In the meantime, I just want to say that there were some strong points that came out this evening. If you are a green card holder, the change in the cost of the green card, the citizenship application is changing. There's been a stay, but you need to be aware that the prices are going to go up. And so that's something to bear in mind. I think, Ms. Houseman, you pointed to what needed to be done to make sure that you are safe in this country and avoiding removal procedures. So pay attention to what's coming. Save some money, start looking at your citizenship application right now. We also want to make sure that we are helping those families who need funding, families who are possibly in deportation or removal proceedings, and they are no longer able to provide for their families. If they're in detention, think about it. If you can add to the bucket and the basket to get people safely through this process and through this difficult time. I think we have all the email addresses for the council persons on this seminar, so we can help in any way we can. I don't know that I'm able to find the time to be at any of your rallies, but I think that if we can put our hands in our pocket and even make a contribution, that might be a step in the right direction. There's been a wealth of resources here tonight. I want to thank you all for being here. If there are no more questions, please feel free. Dean, I saw your hand. Unmute yourself as we try to wrap this evening's presentation up.
I mean, I couldn't come and don't say thank you to the city of Hartford, the entire Jamaica. I must thank you for, especially my attorney, Tanya, who have been with me. For most of you who don't know me, I've been the scout leader for the past 30 years, and I represent Jamaica as the scout ambassador. And I'm very, very proud to say that I've restarted Hermitage Citizen Association, a very troubled place in Jamaica, and it's very active. I've also developed a diaspora here for the people of Hermitage to work with the Hermitage community. And, you know, I was hospitalized for over a year. So I've been out of circulation, and my lawyer, Tanya, has been one of my strong supporter, my motivator. And I'm here ready, waiting. I also used to teach a citizenship class for over 10 years. So if anyone needs help in the citizenship, I'm more than willing to help, you know. So thank you for having me, and thanks again.
Thank you for all that you've been doing, Dean, and it's nice to have you back. I'm glad you're doing well. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure. I hope you were able to take something away from this discussion, and I hope that tomorrow is a new day for us to help each other and to build the connections that we so desperately need to move this country forward. It has been my pleasure being your moderator, and I look forward to catching up with you when next we meet. Take care.
Thank you, Deb. We appreciate it. And our next session will be in 2 weeks, and we will be focusing on health then. So please look for the flyer. Thank you, everyone, for staying a bit late tonight. And thank you to all of our guests. Good night.
Thank you.